clicker. Good morning. To begin with, I think it's important to set the stage about resources. And Alaska's current near-term and long-term economy is dependent and will be dependent upon some form of resource development, responsible resource development. I'm in exploration, and my views here today are just about my personal views and observations based on 30 years of experience in Alaska's resource policy issues. And I hope to share with you today my love of minerals. As you can see, that's a picture of me in the Ambler Mining District up in the Western Brooks Range. We came to Alaska, and when you're the son of an exploration geologist, you are indoctrinated in why we use minerals and how we use minerals. And so my talk today is going to be focused on a little bit of history, a touch on minerals and some of their interesting uses that you may or may not be aware of. Then I'm going to close out with a little bit of discussion about policy to hopefully set the stage for some additional conversations about resource development in Alaska. So history. I love history, love U.S. history, and I think it's important as we talk about future things to know where we've come from. And of course, most of you in this audience know that when Alaska came into the Union in 1959, one of the key arguments against statehood was concerns that a state with a large land base and small population could not support itself economically. So as part of our statehood compact, we were given title to over 100 million acres of land of Alaska's 365 million acres. And you can see Alaska's land selections reflected there in blue, of course, the big dog being the selections on Alaska's North Slope. Fast forward to 1971 and the passage of the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, where an additional 40 million acres of Alaska's land was titled to our Alaska Native regional corporations, making them the largest private landowners in our state. And then we come upon, in 1980, the passage of the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act, or ANILCA, as we all are familiar with it. And that puts a significant portion of Alaska's federal lands into permanent wilderness or protected classifications. And that is reflected in this patchwork up here. 220 million acres of Alaska's 365 million acres is in federal hands. And now you're asking yourself, well, why is this relevant to a discussion about mineral policy or mineral development? And that's because in Alaska, resource development is completely dependent and dictated by decisions about land use and land use planning. And so knowing the ownership of the various land selections within our state, I think becomes very important when we talk about our future, because things such as access, whether or not a parcel of land is open to mineral entry or exploration or ultimately development, depend upon the classification of our land. So now I'm going to shift gears and talk a little bit about Alaska's minerals. And this is just my snapshot of some fun minerals to share with you. There are a lot more minerals and mineral potential in Alaska than I've even remotely put on this screen. You'll notice that even coal, for example, is not up here. And I've broken them out into what I'm calling rare, critical, strategic, and cool. There's one on there that I'm very excited about in particular. So rare is pretty self-explanatory, hard to find. And that on this slide is defined by the rare earth elements and the platinum group elements. So the rare earths, they occupy the second to last row on the periodic table. And up until about 1950, no one really cared about them. But with the advent of television and other higher technologies, rare earths start to have a lot more industrial applications, and it becomes very important to the United States because we need them in our green technology and some of the other higher tech industries. China is the big dog when it comes to rare earths right now. The vast majority of the world's production comes from China, and that becomes relevant because China has demonstrated that they are willing to use their control of supply for purposes of getting economic concessions from other countries. The platinum group elements, those are among the rarest metals on the planet. And as such, and being rare, they are extremely valuable. As anyone who may have purchased a platinum ring can tell you, they're very, very expensive. But in our industrial uses, they're important for emissions control and catalytic converters. And 90% of the US supply comes from other countries. Now, we do have opportunities here in Alaska. Critical strategic as a classification, so the US Department of the Interior listed 34 minerals in the United States that they thought were critical/strategic, primarily because of concerns over supply disruptions and how that could affect the economy, or because of concerns from national defense. Some of those minerals are critical to weapon systems and jet aircraft and the range of things, of course, that our military depends upon. And so they wanted to have more domestic production. Tungsten, up there on the list, no U.S. mineral production of tungsten. Twice as strong as steel, really important in aerospace and that sort of technology. Other critical minerals I have up there, I'm just going to touch on them later, but tin, copper, gold, silver, and cobalt. Cobalt is the shiny new toy right now in minerals, and that's because it is critical in terms of batteries and battery power. And it's been in the news lately because 50% of the world's supply comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and a lot of concerns there about human rights, labor practices, and environmental practices. There's a prospect in northwestern Alaska right now, originally branded as a copper play. You find cobalt many times where you find copper. And so they're very excited about the potential that brings forward. And last is graphite. We have a prospect in western Alaska called Graphite 1, and that's the cool mineral that I put on my list, and it's because there's this substance called graphene. It is super strong, super light, and it's very malleable. So when we talk about wearable technology, it could be a game changer. However, I have to put a big asterisk on that. There are still several steps before that will actually be something that they can produce industrially, but very, very exciting. And when I talk about graphene, I feel like I'm talking about flubber to my kids. And I do need to do a shout out to my colleague Shane Lasley over at North of 60 Mining News. Wonderful series on critical minerals in Alaska. If you're remotely interested in our supply and our history, it's worth taking a look. So a big portion of my talk, or at least how we build it today, was about green tech and high tech. As a society, as we move to conversations about green energy, we need to also understand that green energy requires a lot of minerals. And so I'm going to just focus on two here today, wind turbines and electric vehicles. Wind turbines, you see up there the minerals in Alaska that contribute to that. Back to those rare earths, 3 megawatt wind turbine right now requires 1,300 pounds of rare earth elements in order to produce it. Requires a lot of copper, same with solar panels and all of that. Electric vehicles. 3 times the amount of copper is required in an electric vehicle than in your standard automobile out in the parking lot today. A lot of the electrical componentry that goes with it. Also of interest, I think, when it comes to electric vehicles, Europe announced here a couple years ago, they want to convert their entire automobile fleet to electric vehicles in the next 10 to 20 years, and the materials needed to accomplish that have to come from mining, and those are minerals that there are potential for within Alaska. Same goes for high tech. And when you do a slide on high tech, you're always at risk at what did you miss, right? So I've just put up here a few things to just guide the discussion. I know I've left a bunch of tech things off of it. The main message is they also require minerals. Minerals that we have in Alaska, whether it's robotics, high-end manufacturing, computers, tablets, notebooks, all of that require minerals. The other one that's kind of hard, dark to see here, I wanted to talk about the more common minerals real quick because I don't want to leave them and just talk about cobalt and graphite and all of that. So going from left to right, we've got gold, copper, silver, and molybdenum. And gold, as many know, is used a lot, of course, worldwide. Majority uses for jewelry. It's also in all of our high-end electronics, and it's in your car's airbag deployment system because it's an extremely good conductor of electricity, and it's reliable. But also when we talk about humans going into space, gold and gold shielding is what will protect them from solar radiation. Has to come from gold. The two middle places, copper and silver, if you want to spend 5 minutes and have a lot of fun, just Google the uses of copper and silver. I think you'd be very surprised as to how prevalent they are in our society. I just wanted to draw attention to 2 specific things relative to antimicrobial properties. So hospitals are converting all of their doorknobs to copper plating because of its ability to fight the bad bugs. And then silver, kind of a fun one here, it's woven into a lot of our higher-end athletic fibers because if anyone has spent any time in polypro, you know that after a while it starts to stink. But if you have silver, you battle the bugs that make your fabric stink. Kind of cool. And then the last slide there, molybdenum, featuring my daughter Olive cross-country skiing. You probably ask yourself, what does Molly have to do with cross-country skiing? Outside the fact that molybdenum is used as a strengthening agent for steel, pipelines, jet aircraft, very, very important. It's also used in a lot of our high-end ski waxes. So if you're into skiing, you've probably used moly waxes. But I also want to use this to illustrate that minerals contribute to Alaska's love of the outdoors. Flying in an airplane, boat, snow machine, four-wheeler, outboard, you name it, if it's got metals, it came from a mine. And I just have to do that shout out to our industry. The last one I want to leave you on in terms of minerals and what we use them, if anyone's out there using a smartphone right now to snap what I'm talking about, just know that it used 62 mined minerals to produce that, including the suite of minerals that we have here in Alaska. I use this a lot when I talk to high school classes because it's about the only thing that gets their attention when I tell them about all the materials that are in their phones, because they're all also usually looking at them when I'm speaking. So I'm going to shift gears to talk about technology within my industry. And our industry, very similar to Alaska's oil and gas industry, our mineral industrial operations are high-tech industries now, if they're not already making that transition. So autonomous vehicles in mining, the big trucks, they're looking to driverless vehicles, require a tremendous amount of, obviously, control system technology. Control systems very similar to what we see within our colleagues in the oil and gas industry. They're bringing in volumes of data that need to be processed. So if you're crushing rocks and trying to get the minerals out of the rocks, you need a lot of this control system technology to know you're maximizing your performance. Going up the top there, I think there's no industry in Alaska that hasn't had some exposure to UAVs or drones, right? Mining is no different, using them for surveying, mapping, and a whole range of things. Up there, that's an example of an operator using it to determine where they're going to do their blasting at the open pit. And I also should say, as I started to talk about technology, this is almost ancient, because who knows what the next 5, 10, 20 years are going to bring in terms of technology. And why do operators want to have technology? It's all about worker safety, environmental performance, and cost performance. Mining is a cost-intensive industry. So we're looking for anything we can do to reduce cost of the operation. It is very, very cost-intensive. On the bottom there, virtual reality, right? An immersive experience. Say you're a mining engineer looking at an ore body, trying to figure out, okay, where's the gold versus the silver and the copper, and how do I maximize that? Immersive to be able to really be efficient in how you're doing your mining. Also on the stakeholder end of things, nothing better than taking a VR kit out to a stakeholder group to start to show what a mining operation is going to look like potentially in their neighborhoods or whatnot. Not neighborhoods, communities. And then a shout out to a local firm called Res3D, who has done some work for us using gaming technology and the sophisticated animations that they have to really illustrate how mining processing will work. Really, really high-end graphics that 5, 10 years ago just weren't even approachable to us. So Alaska, as many know, mining is part of our history. However, our exposure and experience with large hard rock mines is actually very recent. Red Dog Mine came online about 28 years ago up there in the northwest corner of the state, largest zinc mine in the world. We work our way down to Fort Knox and Pogo in the interior, and then Kensington and Greens Creek down on the bottom, Kensington being the most recent mine to come online. What this slide I want you to take away is that there's tremendous potential for mining within Alaska, because throughout the state we have tremendous access to or tremendous potential for mineral resources. And that's where I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about policy to close out today. So the slide I put up on the screen here is from an organization called the Fraser Institute out of Canada, and every year they survey hundreds of CEOs and senior executives and managers within the mining industry to rank different mineral jurisdictions in terms of how do they stack up on 15 different categories in terms of whether or not they want to make investment there. You see across the top, we have tremendous mineral potential, but we're challenged by uncertainty concerning environmental regulations, and this was a specific shout out to the challenges presented to the industry by ballot initiatives. Again, just another slide, regulatory duplication and inconsistencies. We're there just below the Ivory Coast in Kenya. political stability. This was an interesting one to me because I would have thought that all of the states of the United States would rank higher because rule of law and all of that. But I think the fact that a lot of uncertainty that was created from those previous slides influences Alaska, and we drop down. So quality of infrastructure, we don't score very high there, and that's not a knock on the quality of what we have, but rather I think the fact that we don't have a lot of infrastructure in Alaska. By way of example, my father's a consultant on a project in Nevada, and one of the selling features that they have for their project is access to the electrical grid and access to rail. And energy is the big dog too for mining. Mining is an energy intensive business, and low cost energy is critical for future development. All right, this slide just illustrates what we all know, right? That's the map of Alaska, from the Kenai Peninsula on up to the North Slope, our road, rail, pipeline corridor, connectivity to Canada. But what I want to draw your attention to on the slide, as you work your way westward, not a lot of infrastructure. That's not Mike Heatwole saying we need to build a whole lot of roads to connect out into western Alaska. It's just that infrastructure is an important element in making decisions about whether or not we're able to access our minerals. Right now, for many projects, it is incumbent upon the developer to finance the cost of infrastructure, and that's one of the most significant cost components of development is putting in transportation corridor or the power access that's required. I didn't want to leave it all gloom and doom, so I got two slides from that Fraser report. Investment attractiveness, you see we're top 10 there, and then over here in terms of best mineral potential, we score very, very high. Obviously, we have a tremendous mineral suite. I'm not going to read all of this. I just want to, because you probably already read them quicker than I can draw your attention to them, other than its challenges with the negative sign and opportunities with the positive sign. And this very fuzzy thing in the middle is recommendations from the Alaska Minerals Commission. Every year, my colleagues in the industry prepare a report for the legislators and the governor on issues of concern of state policy and federal policy that they think needs to be worked on. And I just drew out that they really want to urge our state leaders to be stronger advocates for the mineral industry in Alaska. I also want to do a shout out to my colleagues at Alyeska with they didn't know it couldn't be done. Because that was the motto of the construction of the Alaska pipeline. And Alaskans are up for challenges. Don't tell us we can't do something because we're going to go figure out a way to tackle it. And I think that's important because attitude and that approach become very critical in the, where do we go from here? I'd love to be standing up here or have somebody else be standing up here 10 years from now where instead of calling out the Republic of Ireland, who tops all the charts there in that Fraser report, it's Alaska, where Alaska is a jurisdiction where they do as they say constantly, have a can-do attitude that follows the laws of the land. Great stuff, because that is the matter that is within our ability to control. And as I conclude here today, I just want to leave you with the following thoughts. Alaska has tremendous mineral potential. We have the potential materials that could drive the green and high-tech economy that the rest of the world and our colleagues in the lower 48 are looking for. We also have high environmental standards, I would argue among the highest environmental standards in the world, and a track record, a proven track record of working well within those standards. So I think that's another market opportunity. But frankly, I think the strongest attribute we have is our people. We have quality, dedicated people who want to live here. And that's the thought that I want to leave you with, because to me, that's what it's all about. So my life begins and ends, with that slide. My family. I love Alaska, they love Alaska. I know everyone in this room loves Alaska, but the challenge we have is I want their children to love Alaska the same way we do and have the same opportunities that we have. And one of the hurdles we have to do is to get our attitude about mineral policy in the right place so that we're attracting investment, because investment is the lifeblood of exploration. Exploration is the lifeblood of mineral production. If you're not investing in mineral exploration right now, you're not going to have a mine in 20 years. So if you want to have minerals, it begins and ends with investment and the attitudes that the industry or others have about our state. We have a great future in front of us. That's my final pitch. And the path we choose is really up to us. And I thank you for your time.